Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast, where we explore cutting edge strategies to keep teams human centered, drive innovation, and empower you with the tools and insights needed to help your team excel and thrive in today's rapidly changing world. Your host is Dane, a seasoned expert with over 20 years of experience enhancing team dynamics and innovation. In this episode, we're joined by Mait, a seasoned expert in executive search and human resources consulting. With a career spanning multiple continents and a passion for enhancing talent capability within organizations, Alan brings a wealth of experience and unique insights into the challenges and opportunities facing HR leaders today. Dane and Alan explore several critical topics. They'll discuss the delicate balance between investing in technology and people management. Are organizations getting this right, or is a shift in focus needed to empower our workforce? Next, they'll explore what executive leaders expect from HR in 2024. With the landscape rapidly changing, understanding these expectations is key to successfully navigating future challenges. Alan will also share his three-part framework for building effective teams and fostering a supportive work environment that thrives on inclusivity, authenticity, and courage. And finally, they'll examine the increasingly important role of people and culture departments in shaping organizational success and driving performance through strategic HR initiatives. So, teamwork makes the dream work, and we're here to inspire your next collaborative breakthrough. Gather your team or put on your headphones, and let's dive in together.
Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast. My name is Dane, CEO of the Huddle 3 Group. And today I'm joined by a friend and colleague, Mait. Alan is the president of search at Leader, our new HR and leadership consultancy. And he's got a lot of really cool stories to share from his journey working in and around the world of HR and how that impacts on teams. So welcome to the show, Alan.
Thank you, Dane. Lovely to be here.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be really fun. So I know a bit about your story, but our listeners don't. So what should they know about you?
Yeah, so fun fact, I actually live in Las Vegas, Nevada. So as you can probably tell, I'm obviously native. But I've lived and worked around the world, and I think that's something that many people may not be aware of. I'm originally from the UK. I studied at the bar, so I qualified as a barrister at a pretty tender age, and actually left the UK at the age of 22 to move out to Asia. So I moved out to Hong Kong at that time, and that was just a remarkable experience. And I think probably the first step that really tested my risk tolerance, and it's been a kind of common thread throughout my career, is that kind of willingness to step into the unknown, to take risk, and to be exposed to different cultures and really embrace that. I didn't see it at the time. At the time, it was an adventure. But looking back, it really has shaped, I think, a lot of how I view the world and how I view people, culture, and organizations, and just, teamwork. That was 13 years out in Hong Kong. I met some wonderful people, started my recruitment career with Michael Page, and that was a fantastic grounding there. Had the opportunity to establish teams and businesses in China, which was remarkable. And this was way back when Southern China was, and still is, but a hotbed of manufacturing and just another world. It really was another world. And at that age to get exposed to that was remarkable. And then coming out to the US in 2014, after I met my now wife, who is from the US, and again, taking that next plunge and risk, not really knowing anybody out here in the US market, but, following my heart and my belief that I could make a difference wherever I landed. And so fortuitous circumstances met, and I met with the CEO, the ex-CEO of Chapman Consulting Group, Matthew Chapman, who was building out internationally, and said, look, hey, we're continuing to build out in the US. We'd love you to kind of partner with Stephanie Cross-Wilson out here and keep growing that business. And that was a wonderful opportunity. I spent 6.5 good years with Chapman, good firm, good people, learned a lot. And that really helped me cut my teeth even more so in HR search at the top level across the US market. And that sort of, that led into me meeting with Kurt Landon, who was the CEO of Inspira. Kurt at the time was growing this new human capital business, and we had mutual connections through J&J connections internationally. And I butted up with Kurt on a few podcasts and webinars to raise the awareness of the Inspira brand. Yeah. And, we just found a really kindred spirit there as someone that really, sees the value, the real true value and impact that people and culture can bring to a company and the performance of a company and the performance of teams. And we kept in contact, pretty closely in the preceding years. And when the opportunity came to kind of partner and work together, I thought, why not? It's a good opportunity to look at search and from a broader perspective, and to think about search, not just purely from a placement, but also, how you're aligning and assessing the needs of a team and an organization, placing the right person, so the right hire at the right time and the right journey, and then supporting that person as they're in role and helping them be as impactful as they can to their teams, both at a leadership level and all the way through. So that opportunity to create that connection was pretty unique, and it was a eureka sort of moment, a light bulb moment that kind of went off, and that was wonderful. And then, of course, the next stage of our journey, being acquired by the Huddle 3 Group and have the opportunity to work with you, Dane, and the great team there, and continue that vision and accelerate that vision around leaders, individuals, teams, organization, performance, and the power that can really, really bring to a company if it's done well, and if it's done right, and the right investment of time and resources are put into it. So I'd say that's a nutshell. But
it's a good journey, and you don't meet that many lawyers that quit at 22. Like, I've heard of lawyers quitting a good ways into their career, but 22 is like, most people haven't even finished law school here in the US at that age.
No, for sure. And look, I mean, it was all I ever wanted to do. I remember as a child watching that car boot slam down at LA Law. And, it was kind of things like that. But I started off doing sort of paralegal work and summer intern work with sort of friends whose families were in the legal field. And like I said, it was all I ever wanted to do. But what took me away from that was the connection to people. And it seems strange at such an early age, but to say, hey, look, I see the value, I see me more connecting with people, culture, wanting to spend more time, I guess, in the field, and trying to uncover, human resources problems, I guess you could say, and talent challenges, and that just really spoke to me. So I look back with fond memories, and I met some wonderful people, developed some really good skills along the way, and I cherish that opportunity that I had to have that experience very early on. But it was the right move at the right time, which is again kind of a common thread to what I do. It's a job.
Yeah, I like that, thinking about stepping into the unknown and growing, and more time in the field is very interesting. I think when you look at teams, you look at the work that we get to do together as humans. Being out in the road, meeting lots of different teams and lots of different customers is one of the gifts of working in, executive search or some of the other human capital roles, is that you're not just in one team. You're getting to bridge multiple teams, see best practices, see some more kind of progressive thinking and some more conservative thinking, and see how that fits in different scenarios.
Really do. I mean, you really do. I mean, and I think just the awareness that there's many different ways to reach the same goal. But the important piece is not just kind of getting there quickly. It's kind of how you get there, who you bring along that journey, and how they feel and how they grow and you grow as part of that journey. And sometimes when you're so involved in an engagement or a business practice, you kind of might lose sight of that. But it's important to take a step back and kind of realize that you've been fortunate to have the exposure you have, and then how do you use that? How do you bring that to your interactions in your workplace with your colleagues in your daily life? Because it's almost criminal to kind of not use that. And when you've been given that opportunity, that unique opportunity to see the world and see different cultures in action and see excellence in all its forms.
Yeah. And you touching on different cultures, I always found that was helpful. It gives you a lot more sense of difference, which is becoming more and more an important theme in any business. Even domestic businesses now leaning into that difference. You shared there in the introduction, when you started working with Kurt, you took a more holistic approach to not just finding the person who had the skills to do the job, but really assessing the organizational capability, the team fit, the coaching through the onboarding. So it's about success right through.
Yeah.
Not just finding someone, but making sure they land well and that their team members know how to work with them well. That is a big shift, but it's surprisingly uncommon in the industry.
It is. It is. No, I think the kind of want is there, the knowledge is there. I think sometimes how services companies are structured doesn't create the opportunity for that fluidity or connection. And so it's important to kind of put the end user or your customer front and center and think what's beneficial to them, right?
Yeah.
Not how we're structured, how we work together, what relationships we might have versus our colleagues in different parts of the world, but what's important for that individual, that team, that company, that organization, at the stage of their journey they're at. And I think a lot of it is readiness. And
Yeah.
it comes down to kind of understanding or paying attention to when an individual is ready, when an organization is ready, when a leadership team is ready. And, if you can align all of those things, then, magic can happen.
Yeah.
But so often that doesn't happen. And, there's attrition, there's misalignment, and, that stops companies scaling and performing and teams performing as optimally as they could do, which is a shame. But it's difficult, managing all those things and identifying those things in people and organizations. But it's critical, I think. And so that was the challenge in my mind, looking at that, going, right, this is the nut to crack. This is what's going to separate, an excellent hire from a bum in a seat, which I think is, unfortunately, where some of the industry kind of look at it.
I think you're right. I think the dynamic of bringing a key leader into a team is extremely fluid, and done well, it can have huge lift, but done not even poorly, done in a mediocre fashion, it can have huge disruption. So I think it's interesting. You see teams that sometimes hire because they think they need to. Teams sometimes hire because they're replacing someone who was in seat that was valuable. And in any of those contexts, maybe there was an acquisition, maybe there's entering a new market, but in any of those contexts, it's always very different when you're bringing that leader in.
Yeah, for sure.
With your focus being more squarely on bringing HR and people leaders into business, that's also a little bit unique. I know a lot of search firms out there tend to be more generalist, but being deep in the HR people functions, how much do you see that team or those team members joining teams, come in with great ideas on how to settle in and move through change management, given they come from HR, versus, needing that help? I mean, it's kind of like doing your own doctoring.
It's a cobbler's children, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And it is. And I think there's always a look after yourself before you try and look after other people. And I think, good HR organizations and good HR leaders, I've seen always kind of check that and remind their teams that it's important to make sure that we are operating optimally, that we're looking after each other, that we have the right skills before we can go and, work with the business and understand the business for sure. And creating that kind of space and time to do that is tough with all the demands that everybody has and increasing demands that put on HR professionals at all levels, really, now needing to be technology experts, AI experts, as well as, masters of the return to work policies and the hybrid working and managing. It's just a lot, it's a lot put on the profession. But, arguably that's a good thing in the sense of, you look back at, finance and CEOs have had their heyday, through other crises. We come through the pandemic and it was really kind of HR's time to shine. And I think some really have and demonstrated their ability to show up the right way with the business. But it's an interesting path because I also think there's been a missed opportunity a little bit in that space to kind of show up and drive innovation. And almost kind of resorting in some cases back to more of a compliance control. You're in the office, 2 days a week, your travel is limited, your exposure is limited to certain leaders, there's a bit more control, it appears. Whereas I think just before the pandemic, it was almost like the golden time where HR was, had a seat at the table, becoming more respected, driving a lot of innovation, driving a lot of thought leadership. And then unfortunately the sort of, the lid got put on top of it, and everyone's been kind of reacting since then, and things feel a bit more safe, which I think has created some inertia, stifled innovation, and perhaps kind of, remove some bold decision making, which is, is valuable. So it's a tough time, I think, to be an HR leader and being able to show the value that you have when things are, constantly, when there's a lot of change, a lot of transformation that you don't have control over. It's tough to plan ahead.
I think you're right. I think what was interesting in the pandemic, and we saw it in multiple businesses, multiple industries, all of a sudden the world's thrown into an unexpected situation. People can't come to work and everyone's looking to HR to solve the problems. How do we get these people back online? How do we keep them engaged? How do we change our ways of working? So it was a great moment for HR, but it was also a stressful, burdensome moment. And I think you can see from business to business, there have been leaders who have done great work, been recognized for it, and continue to ascend. There's some leaders that did great work, were not recognized for it. And once the crisis was past, people went back to their old ways. So that's a bit sad. But then there's also a lot of people who tried to do great work, probably didn't execute well because it was hard. And therefore, they may have even gone more backwards in their organizations, their relationships with CEO, CFO. One of those areas, I think, has been the heavy tooling up going to COVID of all of these digital devices and methods. That one's been hard. And then on the flip side, there's been the return to work challenges where I think a lot of HR professionals have been caught in the crossfire, depending on the department or the business or the industry segment. There's been a lot going on. So it is a moment of uncertainty and excitement, I guess, for the industry at large.
It feels like that. It does feel like that. And, you go to a lot of conferences and you sort of try and get a pulse on what people are thinking about and the latest technologies coming around the corner. And I don't know, I have a pretty sort of, I guess, a bold view on somewhat of an over-reliance on technology, and over-reliance, whether that's the right word, but, the want to solve some challenges that we've been talking about for 10, 15 years around sort of performance management, engagement, and engagement through the search process. And there's a lot of bright, shiny new tools out there. And the danger is that they all kind of, appear in the kitchen cupboard, the top drawer of the kitchen. And I think Josh Burson mentioned that on a conference a couple of years ago. So I'll take that off him, but it resonated. And it's not born out of laziness at all.
No.
It's the want to solve some of these meaty problems. And I just wonder whether the investment in technology tools could be put into the development of people managers and the skills with people managers and teams, whether that then solves some of these problems, and we're not still talking about performance management in 15 years' time. And so I do think about the convergence of a lot of these technology tools. I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation in that industry, which is good. There's also some great innovative platforms that are coming up and really looking at how to bring equity, equality, representation, and transparency into a lot of processes, which is important for sure. So it's a bit of a minefield, I think, how you navigate those. And of course, costs can spiral out of control if every 6 months you're looking at the bright new thing that comes around the corner and wondering why you don't have that. And then 50% of your team are not using the tool properly and don't want to. Things get costs get pretty aggressive pretty quickly. And you think, well, if I'd invested that in people management skills, then perhaps you wouldn't be there.
It's interesting where you're going on people management. We've seen a lot of posts out there and research out there that says people leave bad bosses, people leave bad managers, they don't leave companies. We also know that middle managers have been heavily overburdened through particularly the pandemic, but even all of the digital transformation and the social shift that we were seeing through the 2010, 2020 kind of era. And I think people management is a little bit of a lost art. I think all of the tools and the technologies kind of pull us away from that human interaction, human connection. And I guess if you think about it we like to talk about tactical HR and strategic HR, but that's a continuum, and all too often we simplify it and we say innovation, i.e. technology, and compliance, i.e. administration. And we're not thinking about all the important stuff in the middle, working with people.
You just think about how, people are the ones that really think about it. I mean, they create the vision and the opportunity for some of these remarkable technology tools to exist. They don't happen by themselves. So the human kind of innovation, intuition, and the courage of being able to be creative and fast fail and move on, and the innovation and that comes with that is uniquely human. And, I think that it is a lost art form, to be honest with you. I think, more a time to unlock that in humans and more people and underrepresented communities where they are being, perhaps neglected, not listened to. There's genius and that's one thing I've learned. There's genius everywhere. There really is. Yeah. And it's just how you unlock it and how you see it. It takes patience sometimes, and that's difficult, right? To square sometimes with aggressive business goals and shareholders and stakeholders. Time is not your friend. it's a difficult balance. That I think that's something that we're struggling with right now is how do you create space and time for your people to develop skills, bring that innovation to bear when there are competing priorities for time and investment elsewhere. It's how to square that circle.
It's a tricky one. That actually leads me to one question, which is if there's an HR leader out there listening into the show and they're either taking a new job to go and work with an executive team or getting promoted or just reinventing themselves in their current executive roles working with a team, what are you hearing when you're out talking to customers that CEOs, COOs, CFOs, like those top executives are wanting from their HR and people leaders? What should people be showing up? How should people be showing up in 2024?
And I think there's kind of two elements. There is a tactical component to it. I think there's a baseline expectation of, being able to do the job and having a good breadth and depth of skills. And I think even more so when you're looking at slightly smaller organizations, I think it's important to differentiate, enterprise and small, because the need to be able to do many things well and, perfection being the enemy of good within these smaller high growth companies, what's good is good enough for now.
Yeah.
Is that going to help you grow and scale into, possibly not. So you need to think about, again, the right hire, the right time, the right skill set. But I think the understanding of the business dynamics, the understanding of, finances, being financially astute and aware of what's happening in your industry, with your company, with competitors, and how margin can directly impact people and org strategy. If you're operating over here, but you have you're not associated, you don't understand the business dynamic, then what you're creating centrally, it has no correlation. And then there's a question of why is my business partner not taking this on, or why they're not seeing the value? It's because you're operating in this sort of ecosystem that's just disassociated from the reality of that sector, perhaps, or what's happening.
Yeah.
So I think people are looking for industry expertise. I think they're looking for a voice, someone that really is able to drive change and pull it through the organization so it doesn't just sit. There's a strong thread of talent development at levels below, so you can ensure that message is carried through.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, building capability at that frontline, first line people manager level, because people refer to it as like the frozen middle a lot of the time, and things just get stuck there. And I think a lot of that is, our leaders developing that middle. Are they giving that middle the right visibility and opportunity to pull that message through? And I think good senior C-suite HR leaders understand how to do that.
Yeah.
And understand how to hire their next levels down to pull that through. But challenge, I think that's a big one. I think COOs, CEOs, GMs, they want to be challenged. They want to be challenged respectfully, but they do want to be challenged. And I think, you look at a CEO's role now and the important focus on people. I mean, let's face it, people make an organization. Products are important, of course, but people make the organization. And the awareness of that, I think, is becoming more pointed now. And that is because of, I think, CHROs conveying that message and pushing that message effectively. And that's a great thing. That carries a lot of responsibility, though, to deliver if you do.
It does.
And I do think that a CEO wants that in a CHRO. They want to see that there's someone that's got that capability to be outspoken, but also be really accountable for driving significant people and culture transformations across a company.
Yeah, I like that approach. And are you seeing more CHROs, CPOs, like you said it earlier, being out in the field? Are you seeing them getting out in the field more in those larger footprint organizations? Are they going out and going beyond the listening tour and actually walking the floors, talking to all levels of organization, getting their sleeves rolled up?
I think I think there's a yes. I think there's a segment that do, and I think it's noticeable when they do. And I think then engagement really pulls through the organization, and you start having people talk about their leader as someone who's just more a friend, someone who's a confidant, someone who, and they're amazed and they see a CHRO of an 80,000 person organization turning up to a town of 500 people and there's a manufacturing plant there, and people are like, wow, that individual's really taken the time out to come and understand what's important to us. And they're not sitting in the ivory tower. I think, financial restrictions from travel are real, right? And of course,
Yeah.
health considerations over the last few years have been real. So has it hampered some of that impact and effect? Yeah, for sure. And are we trying to substitute that with technology to improve visibility and engagement through things like Zoom? Yeah. And to a certain extent, it's helped. But there's little substitute for, someone knowing that you've spent 2 hours to get to an airport, spent 10 hours on a flight, spent another 2 hours to get to a
That's a
hotel,
lot.
and putting that commitment to spend time with you and your team on the ground to understand what's important to you. That goes a long way. I think that goes a long way. And we're missing that a bit, I think, on the whole.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think with all of the data that we now have, it's easy for HR and people leaders to sit back and kind of manage from the control room. Maybe they're not entirely in the ivory tower, because I don't know too many HR leaders who aren't, getting their sleeves rolled up in daily tactical, shoveling. But they're definitely a little 1 or 2 degrees removed. And I think getting back into the framework of everyday employees and the ways of working, supporting, more coaching. I think we're seeing in a lot more of these optimized kind of HR functions. That seems to be unlocking a lot more potential for teams.
I think so too. And I think it's also, what's also important to remember is, HR's role, when I say HR, people and culture's primary role is to enable business. It's to help support the business growth. And so arguably you'd say, well, those leaders on the ground are the ones that should be delivering the message and training and developing their people.
Yeah.
And the HR teams are there to support, facilitate their ability to do that. And that's true, right? It is. And that's why I think when you find the very best HR leaders, it's those that kind of put the business first and understand that dynamic and really push their business partners to do the work on the ground. And that kind of level of gravitas that you need to be able to influence is key. So that's one other thing, actually, I forgot to mention. The ability to influence without control and direct control is a critical skill, I think, for an accomplished CHRO.
Which I like to call, in layman's term, sales skills.
Yeah.
Because it is selling, right? There was a good conversation we had the other day that HR is becoming more and more of a sales and marketing function, because you're having to communicate with people up, down, and sideways, outside, inside, and you're having to influence or sell, educate people to get behind programs. And that's actually made more difficult. You've got to be an even better influencer if you haven't got executives kind of leading that charge, making that initiative a non-negotiable. And I think that's part of what some HR teams have suffered through in the last few years coming out of COVID, is they were asked to go and do all of this stuff, but the executives, once it was no longer needed, were very quick to say, well, it was never my thing. We just did it because we had to.
Right. No, for sure.
Yeah.
You do. But you do see some great HR leaders with that marketing background, marketing communications. You do, for sure. And you think about talent acquisition functions where talent branding is such an important component of that strategy.
Yeah.
It's marketing, right? And, I do think there's also an opportunity here, I would say, for senior HR leaders around their own branding. Their own branding within and outside of organizations. Because people join companies for the product, people join companies for the business, for the industry. It's mission driven, but they join also because of the leader.
Yes.
And when do they get access to that leader? They don't. The only access they might have when they're not part of the organization is through media or through posts. And that's kind of limited, really, to be able to get a real pulse on, is this the organization I want to work for? Is there a leader I want to work with or for? And so I do think there's an opportunity there to kind of help with that. And that's not just a CHRO, but all of the executives in an organization.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. And we are seeing still very small numbers, but we are seeing more CPOs, CHROs, vice presidents, directors in that profession become more vocal, become more active out on platforms like LinkedIn and conference talking circuits. And it's a good thing. It's a really good thing. I've got this acronym that I've been playing with lately because I like acronyms, and it's the SHOW acronym. And I think it applies very well to HR leaders in great teams. So SHOW, strategy and storytelling. So an HR leader's got to be able to tell, whether it's the CEO or the peers or the team members below, where they're going, why they're going there, how they've seen it work before, why they hope it's going to land this way. So that's the S. The H is health. And we've been talking a lot about health and wellness as an industry, but I think people leaders need to be modeling great behaviors of health individually and team, including having tough conversations. The O is outside influence, and I think outside influence is becoming more and more important. So when you think about building your brand, building your profile, there's a perfect opportunity to meet with other people in your community, see what they're doing, be influenced by what one industry may do differently from your industry, and maybe even what one function does. It might not be an HR function. What do digital marketing people do? What do engineering people do? What do salespeople do? How do I fold that back into my HR team and capabilities? And the last one's the W, and it's work, right? There is the high, fancy, exciting innovation. There is the lower, have to do compliance level work. But there's a lot of work in the middle where you've just got to be engaging people and getting it done. So I think it's a cool framework that I've been playing with. And I think with what you're describing of the need to be tactical, the need to be strategic, understand business dynamics, influence, it all sort of holds together pretty well.
It does. I love that outside piece as well, because going back to the kind of human element, I think that's where innovation comes from. It's meeting different teams, it's meeting different businesses, meeting different people in different industries, and then thinking how you can take the sort of the best of that and bring it to your own workplace, your own team. And you don't do that through technology. That's not going to do that for you.
No.
It's the human connection. It's this. I mean, this is the best computer will ever have, right? And so I think sort of training this and exposing it, and that's a skill. I think that's a skill that we need to kind of hone and develop and push people to.
Yeah.
And I do think some companies do. I do think some companies encourage spending time with different divisions, different parts of the business, different functions. And you do see that individuals who've moved around different countries, different businesses, different functions, there is that extra level of innovation, awareness, of courage in those individuals that then shines through in their teams.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think is beautiful about that, is that the teams often don't have to have that same experience, but they're exposed to it.
It's like an osmosis of sorts.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
So maybe osmosis is another O.
There you go. Outside influence and osmosis, they're kind of two sides of the same coin. On that point, you just mentioned courage, and I know that's been a theme from today, but we were talking before the show about good foundations for a team, and you had a 3-word framework. Would you be open to sharing that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think inclusivity, authenticity, and courage. And so when I think about inclusivity, it's really ownership. It's allowing your teams, your people, giving them a sense of ownership for the work they do and the value they add, but holding them accountable, holding people accountable for that. I mean, that's a great gift to give somebody, is that opportunity to shine, but have some accountability for delivering and holding people accountable to do that, and holding each other accountable in a team dynamic to do that. And having the psychological safety is a third piece of inclusivity, allowing that within the team. Be vulnerable, it's okay to fail. It's just learn from that failure and encourage that within your teams. And so the second piece, authenticity, is, as I see it, is a kind of culture of feedback, that compassionate candor of, show up authentically, show up with vulnerability. And if you can have those moments as a team and a team within teams, the strength of bond is remarkable, and you can just achieve. But you can support each other, you can guide each other, you can call each other out. And it's a nice dynamic to have, because it crosses that boundary into professional intimacy. And that professional intimacy is also where I think you get discretionary effort. And that is, I think, the secret sauce to a team, a good team, a performing team. And then courage, be bold, be curious, be creative, fail fast and move on. And so I think that those 3 pieces, your inclusivity, authenticity, and courage, if you can have those cornerstones in a team, I think you're well on your way to building something pretty special. And I think about the world now and just how challenging it is, and how it's difficult to plan 12 months, 18 months, 24 months ahead. You've got to be agile as a team. You've got to be able to sprint. You've got to be able to turn and pivot. And I think you can only do that effectively when you've got all these things in place.
Yeah, I believe that. In fact, it reminds me of we used to do a plus delta exercise with teams because you can't always know exactly who's got what and when. The workplace is very dynamic. But going back to your point on vulnerability and being bold, being curious, we do these plus delta exercises and you'd go around the table 7 minutes, you do 3 minutes on what's awesome about Alan. Alan's not allowed to speak. All of the people just knock out points. And then you do on the other side, what does Alan struggle with? Bang. So you just got this feedback session, right? Going back to your authenticity, you really draw it out quickly in a team. And then you draw a line and you say, okay, we got 1 minute. What are 2 things that Alan can do more of or less of that's going to move the team towards our target? So we're not into job descriptions. We're not into project management, Trello boards. And it might be like, hey, Alan's brilliant at getting around and telling stories to the team about why we're doing something. He's got to be out telling more stories to the team. It can be as simple as that. And it really allows the team not to work towards solving problems and gaps, but to work towards leveraging the strengths of the team, which I love.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I think that's one of the things that certainly since the acquisition, we've really sort of seen as a team is that they want to create the safe space of people to be able to have those discussions with each other and learn people's superpowers and really be kind of surprised at what they hear and see. And it's remarkable just by giving people that platform to share. It's super powerful. And again, it doesn't happen enough. And I think we're very fortunate to be able to do that here for sure.
No, it's neat. So inclusive, authentic, and courageous. Good foundations for a team, particularly when you're leading from the HR function. Couple of final questions as we start to wrap up. We were talking a little bit about the Transform conference we were at recently and how, you can be at risk sometimes of being in a professional echo chamber. Everyone in HR is talking about what HR is excited about, and we're not really listening for what CFOs, COOs, engineering managers, software engineering teams, whatever it might be, are needing. What are you seeing as far as the emergence of future people and HR leaders from other functions? Is that a thing? Do you see it as something that may be emerging?
I think it is. I think if you boil it down to the skill set of kind of what it is to lead people, lead organizations, it can come from many different places. We talked about marketing, communications, PR, even to a certain extent. We see lawyers, move into run HR functions. You see CFOs do it, and I think it does tell a lot. It does say a lot about the organization, their priorities, their culture as to who is sitting at the top of the CHRO role and what their background is, for sure. I think it's a more attractive function, I do, than it ever has been. I think people look at it now and they realize the impact that people and culture have on an organization and directly the bottom line.
Yeah.
And I read this piece on, it's a bit of a tangent, but Dave Ulrich had put this video about the return on intangibles. And I loved that. I thought it was just such a refreshing way to look at, companies that can have the same valuation, the same stock price or very similar, but be considered to be very different in terms of their actual value. And what is that? Where does that come from? And a lot of it, I think, is people. Along with it is culture. And that really, I think, does drive a lot of value and intrinsic value that it's hard to maybe put a figure on. But I think, business leaders coming into the HR function can help with that dynamic. And I think commercial leaders also leading people functions and blending sales, products, people can be really powerful. I remember, crikey, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I don't think many people were looking to move into the HR space from those sectors. It's just completely changed. And I think we're seeing it now even within private equity. I think we're seeing, yes, it's important. I really believe, I think it's great that a lot of these private equity firms now are putting more stock in people, culture, developing people, developing leadership teams, and realizing the value of that can bring to an exit or a potential suitor, right? If you have a strong, emboldened, cohesive, high-performing team, your company's going to scale. It's going to perform better. They just will.
On all fronts.
On all fronts. And so I think you look at that, and people have always looked at PE as being like, oh, the enemy to people and culture. I don't think that's the case anymore. I really don't. I think if anything, I think it's a bold move to really invest in people and invest in leadership teams. And I think the more that happens, I think the better the whole industry is going to be. So I think it's almost like heyday again.
I think you're right. And I think bringing people from other functions, it is attractive because the HR people function now has so much more analytics and science and strategy and customer touch points than it ever has before. And there is real impacts tangible within the business, but also outside. Like look at Gary Ridge and some of the other great leaders out there that talk about sending employees home happy and how that filters through the community. I mean, you can have a really big human impact at a time when, despite some of the challenges that the profession's having, probably with fatigue from different tools and different work practices through the pandemic, you can really come in and drive a very quick, fast, and exciting level of change for an organization from a really unique seat.
You can. And I think what's important there is also you've got to have a CEO and a board that's willing. Right?
Yeah.
And that comes back to the sort of readiness piece as well, is that you hope everybody is, and not everybody is. And so I think when people are looking at potential companies and organizations or industries to join, doing that research is so important for yourself, because sometimes you might be the most accomplished HR leader, but you're in the wrong role, the wrong company at the wrong time, and it's an uphill battle.
It is. Which actually brings me on to a final point, thinking about the future of teamwork. You used a great phrase with me recently, which is the future is fractional. And we've had a few guests on the show to talk about fractional, but in that HR people leader role, fractional is a very interesting transition phase, because if you've left a great job for whatever reason, or if it's time for a change, it can be a great way to go out there and work with and meet some CEOs and other leaders, PE and VC firms. I know a lot of VCs and PEs are now engaging past chief people officers, chief HR officers on a fractional basis. And you get to build that network. You get to try a few different things and maybe almost design the role or the direction that you want to go in next.
And I think, speaking with, there's elements of what's enticing about that is, I think, the flexibility to work with, multiple different companies, different leaders, and have that exposure. And that in itself is energizing, right? Osmosis, you kind of pull ideas from one to another, and that's beneficial for any company you're working with then. I've had a lot of CHROs who have stepped out and done it, said, look, now I'm more valued. And this was something at Transform. I kind of laughed and nodded my head when they spoke about that, because the same company, just switching from a permanent employee to a fractional employee, all of a sudden your value add increases and you're listened to.
Isn't that wild?
It's phenomenal. And I can understand why people do it. It's, the challenge there is the network and the business development piece to it. If people have the community and have the flow of business, it can be a very attractive way to go. But then people also miss, I think, that connectivity with people on a day-to-day basis. And that sometimes drives people back. And also, the stability, the financial stability. I mean, let's be real, right? I mean, if you're with a corporate, you have many bells and whistles that are beneficial for yourself and your family stability. And fractional doesn't at the moment offer all of those. And, we're in a sort of a healthcare insurance system, which doesn't necessarily support single income fractional workers.
Not in the same way. Yeah, you're right.
Not in the same way. And so I think there's opportunity there. I really do. And I think that there's probably a seismic shift about to happen. When we see a lot of really progressive insurance technology companies, I think, trying to solve this. And I think it's great. I mean, that's where the investment should be, I think, because it's a monumental problem. But I do think that it is the future in some senses. I think at the executive level, it's happening now. Once it starts to pull through levels down, if you start to see middle managers, early career individuals saying, look, I want to work with 3 companies, not just one, because I want the experience. I don't want to spend 20 years in this one organization. Once you start seeing that, then things are going to have to change. And I think that will be really interesting to see how companies can get around sharing an employee, and the benefits that they'll reap from that.
I think it's huge. You get to do more of your favorite work. And let's be honest, like once upon a time, HR and marketing were much more simple functions, and you now see a lot more HR and marketing agencies and providers and specialists because it's become, there's 35 different flavors, right? And sometimes companies are forced to make do with 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 30 people covering all of these functions of the HR profession, but maybe getting really good small teams engaged to work together on really meaningful projects over time means that you can move much further downfield. And that's exciting.
I agree. And I think the downfield analogy there, I like that kind of sporting analogy, because I do think there's a lot that corporations can learn from sporting teams. I really do.
Yeah.
I think that there's some of the kind of the simplest aspects of how you bond as a team and how you balance people's superpowers, It's astonishing. I mean, you look at American football, everyone is, the one position, that one person must be X high, weigh X amount, and do the 40-yard dash in X amount. It's that finite, but you need that level of awareness, sophistication to build a whole team together, which as a unit is phenomenal, right?
Yes.
It's the same within teams and organizations, as I see it. And so having those areas of expertise and understanding specifically what people can do and then creating a whole, that lift is exponential. So I think there's a lot we can learn.
No, that's neat. Well, it's been a great conversation, Alan. We've covered a lot from readiness to the potential lost art of leadership and people management. I love the genius is everywhere comment. I think knowing how to unlock it is huge, and it's a very attractive prospect for anyone in the HR people function. And then talking through some of those ways to work with the CEO if you're an HR leader, as well as, good fundamentals for great teams, inclusive, authentic, courageous. So there's a lot of good ground covered. If anyone listening into the show wants to check in with you on, what's happening in the HR people field, how to optimize HR people teams, where they might be needing to think next about their career directions, how do they find you?
They can reach out to me by LinkedIn, connect, just maybe mention the podcast, and then let me know if you want to jump on a call. You can also email me directly at alan.mait@leader, and that's lead3r.com. And happy to be a soundboard, happy to share, happy to make connections, introductions. It's a core value of mine is to connect people. So happy to do it.
Excellent. Well, thanks for your time today, Alan.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dane. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. Remember that by embracing vulnerability, trusting our intuition, and approaching challenges with compassion, we not only strengthen our teams, but also pave the way for a future where collaboration thrives. If you're hungry for more insights, strategies, and research on collaboration, head over to thefutureofteamwork.com. There, you can join our mailing list to stay updated with the latest episodes and get access to exclusive content tailored to make your team thrive. Together, we can build the future of teamwork. Until next time.